Going to call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. We do have a quorum tonight with 4 of 7 serving members present. Do we have any changes to the agenda? No. Minutes from the July 18th Special Plan Commission meeting. Do we have any changes to the minutes? Can I get a motion? Moved by Ms. Stake, seconded by Mr. Otto. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? I'll say the ayes have it. We don't have any communications, continued public hearings, or old business. We do have a new public hearing. Plan Case 2208 T13, an application by the zoning administrator to amend the zoning ordinance with minor changes to Articles 1, 2, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 13.
Just as a housekeeping measure, can we call the roll first?
Call the roll first.
Just to get it on the record for officially.
Mr. Ash, Mr. Fell, Mr. Fitch.
Now I suppose I can declare a quorum.
You gotta say you're here first.
Here.
Mr. Hopkins,
Here.
Mr. Otto, Ms. Stake,
Here.
Ms. Upabant.
I sense a change of leadership is in the wind.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I'll go back and open the, I guess we've already approved the minutes. I'll open the hearing again. Plan Case 2208 T13, an application to amend the zoning ordinance with minor changes to several articles. Mr. Engstrom.
Right, thanks. There were some communications about this case staff handed out. One was a revised table 5-1 principal uses. There's a slight revision to the proposed changes. Under hospital or clinic, we're proposing to make hospital or clinic a special use where it is currently a permitted use, and we'll discuss that later. So this is a annual or biannual housekeeping measure where staff goes through the zoning ordinance and makes a series of changes or suggests a series of changes, updating definitions, reorganizing sections, revising allowed uses and parking requirements, and a variety of other changes that will assist in the day-to-day administration of the ordinance, so we can meet current professional practices and to correct a couple typographical errors identified in the ordinance. On their own, a lot of these changes really don't warrant their own plan case. That's why we put them all together in a multi-part or omnibus text amendment. So a bit of background. This is the first omnibus case or multi-part text amendment we've had since 2011. Just a bit of correction for the memo. We actually did republish the ordinance in 2012, so there were some text amendments incorporated into that republishing. But since that 2012 republishing, we've had 3 cases, 3 text amendments. The creation of the IN1 and IN2 light and heavy industrial districts, the gun sales and shooting range regulations, and the pawn or consignment shops. Those 3 text amendments will be incorporated into the republication of the text of the zoning ordinance once we get through this case. So just to go through some of the proposed changes, I'll just hit the highlights here. In your memo and on the web, there's the whole packet. It's got all the proposed changes outlined. Proposed deletions have a strike through. Proposed additions have an underline, as the standard case is. So just to go through these, section 2-3 is definitions. We're proposing to change some definitions and add some. One thing is assisted living facility. We're going to use this. We're proposing to use this term in place of home for the aged, which is a use in our table of uses, but it was actually never defined in the ordinance. So now we're updating the term and adding a definition. Farmers market is another one. Definition we're adding. It's an event held periodically at which a group of farmers and artisans sell produce they've grown, goods they've prepared, and or crafts they've created directly to the public. And that's in contrast to roadside produce sales stand, which is where an individual farmer will sell their goods. A couple other changes: gross floor area and open space. We're amending those definitions to remove some regulations from the definitions and put them into Article 6. And we are also proposing to update the open space ratio illustration in Article 2 here. We caught a couple typos in the numbers. Let's see. Article 5, there's a couple of minor changes just to make zoning ordinance consistent with the building code that we've adopted. We've also got Section 5-12 is the home occupation regulations. We're adding a intent to the section. We're trying to clarify and narrow down what's allowed as a home occupation. We've gotten requests for people who want to do what essentially would be a retail store out of their home, and that's really against the intent of a home occupation. A retail store has a lot more foot traffic coming and going, and they need signs, things like that. Home occupation is really meant to just be something that's in the home. It looks like a regular home, but maybe occasionally some people come and visit, or it gets deliveries. But a retail store would be too much impact in the neighborhood, so we're making it explicit that's not allowed.
Jeff, I have a question about that one.
Oh, sure.
Maybe we can wait till later. Do you know how many current businesses this change would affect?
Not too many. There have been a few, let's see. There might be a few that act as like I'm trying to remember. We got some applications to be like a candy store, something like that, and we really narrowed down how those were allowed, if they were allowed at all. And I'm trying to remember if they were or not. I'm pretty sure this isn't really going to affect very many application or home occupations.
Not that we can tell. It won't affect any. In reviewing the old home occupation permits, I can see two that were retail sales, but they were very limited. For instance, one was a rare book dealer. This was some years ago, with where people called in advance, made arrangements to come to their home, but it was very specific clientele with arrangements in advance. And the other one I could think of that we allowed many years ago actually was a antique furniture sales out of someone's house. But again, it was a limited retail clientele who made arrangements in advance. But as Jeff mentioned, we've had several inquiries lately about, can I do retail sales out of my home? And one of those was a candy store. And when reviewing the ordinance, it's just not clear exactly what the limits are for doing retail sales, what the intent is. We do allow some limited retail sales, like, for instance, if someone has a barber shop or a beauty shop in their home, which they can have under home occupation permit. They can have some incidental, so they could sell some shampoo on the side for people who are already there or their customers. But that's limited retail sales. That's incidental.
Well, I was thinking of one case, the yarn shop right up here off of Springfield. I don't know if anybody lives there or not, but it's in a house, but I don't know if somebody lives there.
Right. That's actually retail use. It's
A business,
not a
okay,
home.
okay. The other one was when we did the gun ordinance, where people talk about selling guns out of their homes. And the specific language of the section was what I was looking at. No retail sales or stock in trade other than sales incidental to a professional or service use shall be allowed. Limited mail order and internet sales shipped to customers may be allowed. So I was just wondering how that particular instance that we encountered before, would this be affected?
That the gun sales, I actually went and looked at that business in their home, and in some ways it would fit with this, although conceivably one provision may not, and that was, again, it was a limited clientele who they did their business over the internet, and then they came, once they did that transaction, they came to the home, they had to fill out a lot of paperwork, and then if they were approved for that paperwork, then they could do the gun transaction there at the home. But it was, let's make sure here. By appointment only, that would fit. And are limited in the number of deliveries that may occur, that would fit. No retail sales or stock in trade other than sales incidental to a professional or service use shall be allowed.
Yeah, that was the part that I wonder what it means, really. I don't think that gun sales are related to a profession or a service use necessarily.
Right. Well, here's what we meant by stock and trade, if this helps, in that rather than allowing someone to have their stock there at the home that customers come look at and purchase, that would be stock in trade.
And clearly, I think some of the people who testified did this. They had,
Yeah.
one guy said he had 150 guns or something.
Yeah. With
Others,
the-
it was an internet kind of a thing where,
Right. Now, there was a case in Behringer Commons where someone was doing internet sales, but they had all these, I don't know what exercise equipment or something, and they were having them shipped to their house, and they were storing them in their garage. We got some complaints about a semi-truck backing up down into a cul-de-sac to someone's garage and unloading like a semi-truck load of exercise equipment or whatever it was for the garage, and that would be considered stock in trade, and that's totally different than internet sales where you're drop shipping from the manufacturer, for instance, where you're just being a representative. In that case, it's a home office, really.
Well, I wouldn't think that we'd want any people selling guns out of their house. That
Yeah.
seems really ridiculous.
Well, we've addressed that in a previous plan case.
And
Actually, we
decided that
talked
it's
about-
fine, right? We don't seem to care much about
well,
that.
that's,
Well-
yeah, I didn't mean to get us off on a tangent. And I think the answer from city legal was that they have a right to do that under
I think they
regulation.
shouldn't have a right, though. I think that's really wrong.
Well, yeah, again, I didn't mean to get us off on that tangent, but I was just wondering how this, different situations where that particular provision of professional or service use creates vagaries.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, going forward,
You have too many people being killed.
there won't be, people will not be able to have occupations such as gun sales where they keep stock in their home. So in the future, that'll be limited now.
Okay, well, that's actually kind of
Limited to what?
clarification.
Sorry?
Limited to what?
It'll be prohibited, sorry.
What?
Prohibited.
Prohibited.
Yeah.
Oh.
From having stock in trade. In other words, you can't keep,
Basically, you can't have a store in your home,
Yeah.
is what we're trying to do, is what we're trying to say. No stores in your home. If you have samples and you want to sell over the internet using a sample or something, that's okay. Or if you have something drop shipped from the manufacturer, that's okay. But generally speaking, people shouldn't be coming to people's home as a retail store or shop.
All right. Moving on to Table 5.1, it's permitted uses. There's a couple changes we're proposing here. One is to add a catch-all category for all other retail uses. This is something we already have for industrial uses. We have all other industrial uses, but we don't have this for retail uses. So this will save us from having to do a text amendment every time someone comes up with a new retail use that doesn't happen to be in the zoning ordinance. Farmers,
If we're going to do
Mr.
questions as we go along, I guess.
sure.
Do we have a definition of retail use? I could not find one.
Yeah,
No.
I was going there too. Retail store.
Yeah, I found retail store, but all other retail uses implies to me that we have a definition of retail uses.
Right, so that's something we could add when we take this forward to City Council.
Yeah. I mean, I understand the principle of an all other category, but the general category then has to be defined.
Okay. Farmers market, I mentioned that briefly. Church, temple, or mosque, this is a use we're proposing to allow in the B3 district as permitted by right. Currently requires a special use permit. In reviewing this use, it seems like it's not a high-impact use. It won't detract from the B3 district. It's kind of complementary in that its main times of use are Sunday mornings or Saturdays or times when retail uses or other business uses are not so busy. And we're also proposing to allow it as a conditional use in the light industrial / office district.
Conditional for what?
As a conditional use in the light industrial district, the IN1 district.
Oh,
You're talking about what?
What use? Church, temple, or mosque. So,
I was missing.
okay. A couple of automotive-related uses, movers, truck rental. These have been omitted from the table of uses, so we're proposing to add those. The single
truck?
sorry?
truck what?
Truck rental.
Should be in what?
We're proposing it as a permitted use in the B3 district, in the IN1 and IN2 district. It's basically just to rent a truck if you need to move something.
Oh,
Brandy, do you have this? I think, yeah, it was the one handed out right before.
Yep. Yeah, and actually what I'm showing here does not have hospital or clinic listed, so, but that was handed out to you earlier. This is a use we feel could potentially have a major impact, and it's currently permitted by right in several districts, including B3 and B4. So staff is suggesting we change the level of permission to require a special use permit for a hospital. Just something that we thought would be prudent.
Mr. Hopkins?
On that, elsewhere, you separate hospital or clinic into hospital and medical clinic. Are you, in this, you haven't deleted the word clinic. Is that just an oversight, or are you?
No, so that separation was in the parking section, correct?
I
I think it was.
Okay, all right.
So we'll get to
Okay,
we'll get to that. But in this
All right.
case,
I think did you go through this already where you have the markets, farmers markets in the parks and schools and university properties?
mhm. Yes. Well, that would
That's
allow.
ridiculous.
There is currently a farmers market in Urbana on the quad every Thursday afternoon. So this would allow that use.
At the university.
But I don't want them in my schools and in the parks.
Okay, well, we can talk about that later.
We can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope so.
All right. And then just at the bottom again, we're deleting the term home for the aged and replacing it with assisted living facility. But there's no proposed changes to the permissions. So moving on to Article 6, we're proposing to add first a couple clarifications to floor area, just changing the order of some words, making it clear that areas for home maintenance are not part of floor area in a single family or two-family use. Then we're proposing to add a new section for open space, which just takes the language which was previously in the definition section and adds it to Article 6 where it belongs, basically. It's bad practice to have your regulations and your definitions.
Are you talking about encroaching in the yards?
I'm going to get to that right
Oh,
now,
okay.
actually.
Yeah, not there yet.
So that's Section 6-5B. So this section lists all the encroachments in required yards. The first thing I want to note is we're proposing to add graphics to the section. Our staff planner, Aditi Kambuj, she did a great job producing some graphics that show what features are allowed to encroach into required yards. For example, under paragraph B3, uncovered stairways and necessary landings can encroach 5 feet into a required yard, but they must be 6 feet or 6 inches from the edge of the property. So that regulation is shown in this graphic, and there's a graphic basically for every paragraph in this section. And there was just a couple changes to the text itself in this section. Basically, the main thing is paragraph 5 here. We get a lot of variance cases where someone tears down their porch and replaces it, but in order to replace the stairs, they need to meet the current building code, and that requires the stairs to encroach into the required yard. We've had 2 or 3 of these cases in the last few years. So this proposed change would eliminate that variance, and it would allow for a reduction, it would allow for a reconstruction of porch stairs in a required yard when it's necessary to bring them into conformance.
That's just owned to their own place,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, just only on the property, not.
Jeff,
Yeah.
I did have a technical question about that. So you've got essentially 2 paragraphs in this section. The one on page 7, section 5, says in regard to porches, terraces, and decks, they can stick 5 feet into the yard, but not within 5 feet of a property line.
Mhm.
The next paragraph says when replacing or upgrading a porch, it can be constructed in a location of the existing porch no closer than 6 inches from the property line.
Mhm.
So is it 5 feet or 6 inches, or am I just missing something?
Right. So the second paragraph only applies to replacing or upgrading of existing porches.
So if I had a porch that was 5 feet from the property line and I wanted to upgrade it by making it bigger, I could run it out to 6 inches from the property line?
Well, the intent is you can replace it in the place it is. So that might,
It's mostly in the place it is. It's
right.
just,
So we might need to do a little
I think
clarification.
a little cleanup, yeah.
Sure. Okay. So that's 2 things I got on my list. Okay. That moves us to Article 8. There's a couple of changes for clarity. And the main change to Article 8 is to add paragraph 8-5L. And this would allow for off-street parking reductions to accommodate legacy trees. The city recently adopted a legacy tree program to recognize significant historic trees in Urbana. So we feel as an incentive for property owners to designate their trees, we'd like to have this a section which would basically say if your use requires parking and there's nowhere on your lot to put that parking that won't impact a legacy tree, then the zoning administrator may waive the requirement for a couple spaces. Moving on to table 8-7, parking requirements. We're a couple of these things, we're just changing the names to.
Jeff,
Sure.
can we back up just real quick on H4 regarding occupation of a motorhome?
Oh, yes.
Stored? I don't think you're changing the meaning here by substituting the word occupied for the other 3 words that were there. But just for clarification, does that mean if someone, drives their motorhome to visit you and they can't stay in it while they're visiting you?
Technically, that's correct, yes.
Okay.
So,
Oh, you know what, a little bit, I see here, the single-family and duplex residents, the incentive would not apply to them, right? So what does that
That's
mean?
multifamily, I think.
no, this reduction shall not apply to single and two-family residences. Yes, you're correct.
Okay,
Why
good.
not to them?
Basically, their parking requirements are very low, and those homes already have driveways and garages for the most part.
Okay,
so
I see.
we don't want to.
Like,
We don't
okay,
want to try to
thanks.
let anyone skim around the rules by
Okay.
doing that. Okay. So as I was saying, there's a couple of things where changing titles actually back to what they were before we changed them, and we basically brought in some categories and narrowed, and now we're making specific uses more apparent in the ordinance. Public utility plant or storage buildings, one. Hardware store, we want to make sure that's something that's in that use category of building material, and garden sales. For restaurants, we're proposing to make a change that would, the net effect of the change we're hoping is to increase the amount of outdoor seating. So the change would say, instead of counting outdoor seating against your parking requirements, we would not do that. And the justification is it's a seasonal thing, and oftentimes it's outdoor seating just substitutes for indoor seating during the summer. People want to sit outside more. So we think there's really no net effect there. Hospital or clinic, here's this change Mr. Hopkins mentioned. Basically, a clinic we feel should have the same parking requirement as a professional office. Instead of saying there's, and basically it's because there's no bed in a clinic. So it's more based on people coming and sitting in the waiting room. So what's the square footage instead of how many beds you have. And then one other change is to add college or university facility to the table. It's currently omitted from the table. And this is basically just based on the individual uses within the building. So auditoriums, there's so many spaces per seat. Office use, so many spaces per 300 square feet. And that's consistent with practice in our Twin Cities Champaign. Okay. So really there's not much significant left. It's kind of just cleaning up some things.
One last point, and it's on 8.3F, trees in the parking lot. And I think this is kind of nitpicky, but it's similar to the definitional issue that we had earlier about retail use, shade tree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think technically all trees give off shade. Some of them don't get off very much shade.
Right, but they all like it.
That, you know,
Right.
you and
Well-
I kind of give off shade as we're walking along, but so I maybe just either make it more specific. So the guy said somebody puts in a certain kind of tree and you don't think it's a shade tree, but he says it is giving off shade.
Well, in this case, actually, we don't have a definition, but we do have a list of approved shade trees.
That's great.
So,
But you need to cross-reference
Yeah,
it
that's right.
explicitly.
Mhm.
And I think it's table 6.4.
mhm.
Though, since that is being mentioned, that's, to me, an odd list of approved shade trees,
Mhm.
meaning a large portion of them are odd trees specified to the cultivar, I think. And there's some obvious trees, in my mind, missing.
Where is that?
It's table 6.4 in the ordinance. I don't know what page it's on.
Okay, I'll find it.
And this is not the place to
No.
review the list of shade trees,
Mhm.
but
That's something we can
I
work
would
with.
make that comment, for, at least for this purpose, by cross-referencing to that list. It's not obvious to me that it's
Ah,
a good list.
We can, yeah. I believe the city arborist came up with those, so
I'm
we
sure
can
he did.
talk to him.
Turkish filbert
I never thought
jumped out at me.
there were some trees that weren't shading.
Well, I
Oh,
think
well,
you don't
I-
want shrubs or yeah, I get the intent.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a couple more changes to the, like the MOR, DRB, and the Historic Preservation Commission. They're currently required to elect a chair every year. And the MOR, DRB doesn't necessarily meet every year, so we're proposing to remove that requirement of an annual election. And the last section, Article 13, we just wanted to incorporate reference to the current Boneyard Creek plan instead of the previous one, which had been referenced. So that is the major changes. Options, Plan Commission may choose to forward this amendment in whole or with specific suggested changes, and we've already got 3 of those. If Plan Commission feels there's any certain changes that require additional analysis, we can bring those back as a full plan case. Staff recommendation is that Plan Commission recommend approval of the proposed multi-part text amendments to City Council as presented herein. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Any further questions for Mr. Engstrom?
Oh,
Look, Mr. Hopkins? Just a second.
Because we've done editing, and I've got one left, in section 1112G, where you change site to development in G2, I think you want to change it from site to development in G1, and G3 as well. I mean, this is a minor editorial thing I wouldn't bring up,
Consistency,
except I think we've covered every single one of the other ones I had, so.
Ms. Stake, did you have anything for Mr. Engstrom?
yes, I just wondered, when it says, finally, the proposed amendment would clarify procedures for Creekway permit applications.
Mhm.
What kind of applications is that you're talking about?
So basically, any parcel that is adjacent to the Boneyard Creek or within a certain distance of the creek it's in the Boneyard Creek District, and they all require a Creekway permit. Some of those are administratively granted, some, basically they all go through this administrative committee. And sometimes there's notice given to Plan Commission. So let's see. So on page 14 of the attachment here, the second to last paragraph, paragraph H, basically we're saying instead of proposed permit, we're saying permit application. And we're saying the application must be transmitted to Plan Commission prior to their next meeting. And any aggrieved party or public official may, within 10 days, they have to be notified. So that's that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Otto?
I have questions about these projections, and so looking at Exhibit B, maximum projection allowed into required yard by eaves, cornices, Why are eaves and cornices only allowed 2 feet 6 inches max, but stairways and enclosed balconies and so on are allowed, well, no, fire escapes are allowed 5 feet. What's the thinking about the 2 feet 6 inches?
Well, I think that's more of a standard width of an eave or cornice, and balconies are a little bit wider. So I think.
I mean, I'm raising this, out of my own experience. I live in a Joseph Royer house, a Prairie-style house with 4-foot eaves that almost definitely could not be rebuilt if a tree fell on them on the right-hand side of my house, according to this. Now, I could come to a special use permit, but I don't know. I think there would be a number of exceptions, in when you get to historic areas of town in some previous periods. And even, when I was younger building ranch-style homes, we used to often build single-story homes with 4-foot eaves. We would go get 4-foot sheets of plywood and go down through doing 4-foot eaves. So,
these are mainly intended to apply to new construction. And as you mentioned, if something happens to your home or to a home in a historic area, there are variance procedures, and those are very often quote-unquote slam dunk cases. So I think that's kind of the reasoning.
Mr. Hopkins?
I'm trying to think about this and whether the diagrams may be sort of too good. In the case of, say, 4-foot eaves, it's not that you can't have 4-foot eaves, it's that only 2 foot 6 inches of them can extend into the required side yard. And it would,
And the standard required side yard is what?
5 feet.
so, I don't know, I mean, I can imagine that could still be a problem in your
happen.
case, but I was thinking that
Okay, probably not.
in general, if you think of it as, okay, I got a 5-foot side yard, and I can take up half of that with an eave, it means there's 2.5 feet at 30 feet between my roof and the edge line. That's not enough for a ladder, for a fire truck, that's not enough for anything. So I think there's a reason.
Yeah.
And at least in single-family areas, balconies, well, I mean, this is a problem. If balconies are at that height, you have a similar problem. But I don't think it's quite as drastic as.
I think the stairs in the side yard are more permissive, the 5 feet, because of the old fire escapes on the sides of houses. I think that's why they were so flexible with that.
So the required side yard, what's the minimum required side yard in a zoning, residential zoning category?
Oops.
It's 5 feet in most districts. In R1, it's the minimum is 7.5.
So that means a fire escape could extend to the boundary line, except it can't then be within 6 inches. Right, that's the rule we're reading here. And we're allowing that for reasons I sort of understand. Okay.
Anything else? Nope. Thank you, Mr. Engstrom. Does anyone care to address the Plan Commission on this case? If you could state your name as usual and sign in on the sheet, that would be most appreciated.
Carol McCusick, 1907 North Cunningham Avenue. Okay, Jeff said that the republication of the zoning ordinance is because of 3 amendments that are staged in line for incorporation. I would assume, well, I was looking at the at 2 of them, and the one about the gun sales and the one about the in August of 2012, and the one about splitting having 2 kinds of industrial zoning and getting rid of office park, that was in May of 2012. And both of those ordinances have this clause that says that both, and I've seen this before, I think, on city council things, it says, the city clerk within 30 days passage, no, not that, a section where they say, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect from and after its passage and publication in accordance with the terms of Chapter 65, Section 1-2-4 of the Illinois compiled statutes. So I don't know if that means it's in effect as soon as that city council ends, or as soon as the city clerk does some work on it. Okay, but I'm going to keep on talking. But if something got, like the industrial zoning text amendment got passed in May, and it had that clause on the end of it, and the gun sale one that got passed in August had that clause on the end of it, probably these amendments that are standing outside of the last publication of the last republication of the whole zoning ordinance are going to want to be incorporated in order, like you'd be standing in line, and the first one that's in line would be the text amendment.
No, I don't think that's the case at all, ma'am. I think that they're enforced as soon as they're passed, and they don't have to be incorporated in with the body of the zoning ordinance in order to be considered in effect. So in other words, as soon as that thing is passed, it's essentially published and would be available for you to have in the final form that the council passes it, and so it's in force immediately. You know that I know that I don't think the city does. I don't know if the city does this, but you know the state government, the federal government, they publish the laws of the session as separate document, and then those are in force as soon as they're passed or whatever effective date is set. And then later, every 2 years, they will weave them into the Illinois compiled statutes or other, corpus of laws and regulations, which is a bit inconvenient if you're trying to keep track of the current language of any given thing. You would have to look at the text amendment and then, say this is where it would go into the full zoning ordinance. So I understand that. So I read your letter, and I wasn't sure if you were worried about the issue of these things being enforced, or the inconvenience of having to reconcile the paper copy with the web copy with the text amendments that aren't yet published. So am I in the ballpark as to what your concerns are?
I would say that the most, the widest view might be to make the publication decisions the best they can be for energy efficiency and budgetary cost and the authority of the documents and the accessibility of them. And in line with those objectives, I was asking whether the balance, there should be rebalancing or of the work that's done on the web and the work that's done for hard copies. And I had the paragraphs from the library because of that.
Yeah, I think I got your point is essentially that they're out of sync and there's a time lag in when those two sources get updated with new ordinances that have been passed. Is that correct?
I was seeing it as highly desirable, like you were saying, to have finally, when I figured it out, I thought better to have, regardless of what kind of amendment it is, whether it's something that's sort of standalone, like this new chapter doesn't affect any other chapters, or if it's a text amendment that was similar to what was just presented, where it's very pervasive change. Regardless, if they're effective at the time that they're passed, they're essentially standing in line outside of the last publication. And I was suggesting that maybe it could be considered whether the web republication should happen with the effective date of every amendment, and then some additional thinking could be about whether where the hard copies would be done as often as the web. If hard copies have a, if they can be made significant, and that I was trying to bring up, that some of the problems with them being of any value at all is evident at the free library. So I thought one of the issues that could be explored for costs, for the sake of comparison, is the cost of having just, you know, a few copies, like for community development and the clerk's office and the library, and, you know, that would be hard-bound copies and have a spine so you could see them on a shelf, you know, you could see what it was, and it would be, you couldn't take pages in and out of it, and
Yeah, available to the public with the most up-to-date ordinances. Is that your suggestion?
It's republication. Maybe it would be every time there was an amendment, but maybe it could be only every time. Maybe you could do it every time there's an amendment that has pervasive change involved. That's it. That was my question about, or if it was a matter of making, not just raising questions, but making a recommendation. But actually, I thought maybe that all of this kind of thing plays into the need for a Board of Government Information to, I mean, I don't think the zoning ordinance is the only thing that's spiral bound.
It would probably apply to the, you know, any city code or any body of laws or regulations that I'm aware of. Changes happen. The official source is only formally published every so often. In the case of web, I don't, you know, that's probably easier than publishing and binding a paper copy. So they might be able to accomplish that a little faster. I mean, I don't know what resources would come into play with that, but Mr. Otto?
I'm wondering whether this is an issue that we're competent to deal with, whether the city council actually controls the way in which they publish these documents, and whether this is an issue that should be brought to their attention, because I'm not aware that we have any authority.
It's probably beyond our authority, but I think it's, you know, having done a significant amount of legal research in the past, it is somewhat difficult to know what state a law or ordinance is in when it's been amended several times. And when you get a text amendment like this that's touching all over the place, then it gets really hard. So, I mean, I think that there's some validity, and I think the council is the proper venue to bring this up, because it's a lot bigger than the Plan Commission's. I mean, we can't even do anything about it other than you know, let you testify and respond to your testimony. So I would urge you to bring it to the council. And I don't know if what city resources have and what would be feasible in terms of speeding up this cycle. But it should be explored, I think.
Should I, may I continue?
Oh, sure.
Under the, for example, on page, well, it's not a for example, it's just while I'm here. I noticed there was still a section V12 on page 42, additional regulations in the OP district.
Are you in the zoning ordinance now, or in the amendment?
Well, Jeff said he was amending V12, but it was about the regulation of home occupation, and I think he meant V13, and V12 is a section that exists in there still, even though it had to do with the Office Park District, which isn't anymore happening since the industrial district. I don't know anything about this stuff. I just
Oh, you're doing all right.
stumbled over this.
I don't know,
one.
Jeff, check that might, I don't know if there's a typo or not. If there is, I didn't catch it.
But I thought it was maybe something for me to find, because layers, these things are gonna need to be done in sequence, and that wasn't really brought out in Jeff's memorandum defending
Yeah, at this time,
republication.
at
But
this
I
time
think
that-
it really
oh, I'm sorry.
speaks, it really argues for web republication, because that could be done every time. I mean, Muni Code updates with the ordinances pretty frequently, I think. So couldn't the zoning ordinance incorporate the amendments as on the days they become effective? Just in fact, maybe that is the import of what this thing said about it becomes effective as soon as it's published, or that's part of the ordinances that I just read. Should I find it again?
No, I think it's just considered published as soon as it's passed, or as soon as the effective date, if the effective date is different from the date of passage. It doesn't mean that it has to be incorporated into the rest of the code or ordinance, set of ordinances.
And you do not feel that this commission could make a decision to do that?
Well, I don't know anything about the commission, and I think that's where Mr. Otto's point comes in. There may be some merit to that idea, but the city council would have to be the one to weigh in on that.
It might be something that I would speak about more in the audience participation, but that's the 5-minute limit. So I would say that the cover memo that I transmitted,
Yes?
this communication
Mhm,
that
mhm.
is about
Mhm.
the publication of the zoning ordinance, that's with, I asked what I thought was supposed to be able to happen under the bylaws of the Plan Commission procedure for hearings, because it's in black and white, and because I thought it was actually pretty good, because it might, if you didn't want to use a lot of paper, it says, the petitioners and opponents should present all evidence they possess concerning the request at the initial phase of the public hearing. Written material from the petitioner or opponents will be accepted by the secretary for distribution to the commission until the close of the public hearing.
Which it was.
Well, by the time, if you just bring your one paper copy and you don't create a whole bunch of copies for an indeterminate amount of attendance, so you don't waste paper, it doesn't enable anybody who's not at the meeting to see it online. But it is good, I think, to have a hard and fast rules for communication. Well, it's on. So if you wanted to go to some web sharing of the communications, which would be nice, especially if it was in advance, you would need to think about that in conjunction with the bylaws.
Well, if somebody brings something to a meeting that we haven't seen before, I'm sure that staff will duplicate it and pass it out, but it would be impossible for it to be in the record in advance. It would then become part of the public record and would be available.
Well, that's a point, I guess, I have in this cover memo that, don't you, you make,
I mean, I've never known of any case where something that somebody submitted wasn't copied and distributed to staff, so I'm pretty sure that would always happen. And then it would be part of the record from that point forward.
the bylaw makes the thing you submit a part of the meeting, the open meeting with the public. But it's just in writing, so people can hear about it. They can hear you talk about it, but they can't see it unless somebody puts something up on a screen or something.
So you would like another suggestion is that you would like for copies of such communication to be made available to people in the audience?
I wouldn't personally like that. I would like it to be explored by a Board of Government Information so we don't
Okay, ma'am, well, that's not
increase
the Plan Commission's, we can't do anything about that, so.
But Terry, or you did not actually follow, it doesn't seem like you followed the bylaw when I thought you were gonna follow the bylaw, plus, on my request, echoed what was in the bylaw, that I wanted to bring my copy here and then get it duplicated, but, but that's,
What provision of the bylaw are you talking about? And then we need to
I-
probably wrap this up unless you have any more specific to the ordinance. But which part of the bylaw were you looking at?
let's see, I was on Article 6, Procedure for Hearings, number
Okay.
17. Was-
Well, as I said last time, they're in the process of looking at the bylaws, and I think the initial phase of the public hearing is the part that's a little vague. In fact, we did get your communication at the initial phase of the public hearing. We got it as soon as we arrived, and it was made known to us by city staff that we had that communication, and we all read that communication at that time. Now, by our procedures, the staff presented their case, and so by our procedures, the public doesn't talk to us first, like at a city council meeting. So the staff presented their case, and then we immediately called on you. So I think that we did follow the bylaws.
So, this is the zoning ordinance page. It's at the city code. I don't know if you can really see it that much, but, okay. I think it did show you how you had the amendments. They're all posted there, and taken together, they would make the zoning ordinance
Right.
complete, but being that it's on the web, why wouldn't it be possible to incorporate every one of them as they become effective?
Well, again, to summarize, I think that there's some of that idea makes sense as resources allow, but it's a city council decision. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Myers?
Just real quick, there is another kind of publication that the city clerk's office does. At the end of the ordinance, typically it says, city clerk's office shall publish in pamphlet form for 10 or 15 days after the passage of the ordinance. Basically, they just print off the ordinance, have it signed, have a copy available in their lobby, city clerk's lobby, for anyone to view for a period of time, 10 or 15 days. I forgot what that period is. But that's required by state law if it's an ordinance that actually has some sort of fine attached to it or some sort of penalty. They require publication in pamphlet form. So that's a different kind of publication. We republish the ordinance roughly every year, and one of the reasons that we don't do it more often with every update is that it creates all these different versions floating out around there, so all the different architectural firms and engineering firms, they could have a gazillion different versions floating out there. So it's easier, honestly, just to say the 2012 version, and then plus during the year there's going to be a few amendments to it which will fold into it annually, hopefully. We kind of do the same thing with the official zoning map. Rather than having a new zoning map every time there's an amendment, we have once a year we have an official map, and then we fold all the changes into the official map once a year.
anything further on this case? Mr. Hopkins? Yeah, exactly. Are we ready to discuss? If we have any discussion or motions?
So, let's see. I move, we send line case 2208 T13 multi-part text amendment, the Urbana zoning ordinance, to City Council, the recommendation of approval based on the editorial changes and so on that have already been discussed.
Moved by Mr. Hopkins, second by Mr. Otto. And can we have a roll call?
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Otto? Ms. Stake?
Yes.
And Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
That's it.
That's it. It's passed. And when will this go to the council?
The next meeting would be Tuesday, September 3rd. That's the day after Labor Day. So typically, they'll hold a special, or they'll hold the city council meeting the day after the holiday. So assuming they're not going to cancel that city council meeting, this will be heard Tuesday, September 3rd.
Okay, great. Thank you. We don't have any new business. I don't know if we have any other audience participation. I think we just had a good round of it.
This is about the annual Carol McCusick, 1907 North Cunningham Avenue. It was about the I'm calling it Stealing a March on the annual review of the bylaws. Now, on July 18th, I was asking about it, and I found out it was underway, but I didn't really find out from that meeting. I think I have a better background now because I found out that the March 21st meeting started that, and this is I'm going to try and make a somewhat targeted point. A targeted point, which is that that meeting, as setting it off, I don't think it came kind of without a lot of fanfare ahead of time, but it did not hold it didn't conduct the meeting the way that your bylaws indicate under determinations, which was all determinations of the commission shall be made at a public meeting by motion made.
Ma'am, we didn't make any determinations. That means a vote. So we didn't take any action on that.
But you gave your staff is working on it, so based on what? Didn't they get an order from you?
No. The staff is working on it because because of some testimony actually that you gave that pointed out to us that we're supposed to review the bylaws periodically, and so that's what staff is doing. And hopefully that'll, they're looking at best practices and different things, and hopefully we'll be able to bring that back up soon, and then we most certainly will follow the bylaws in terms of making a determination, having a public hearing, letting everybody have their say, and provide input.
Well, the annual review is a matter of of the work of the Plan Commission.
Agreed.
Meetings 4, Article 4, meetings number 7, the Plan Commission shall review the Plan Commission bylaws at least once annually at a regular meeting that the chairperson designates.
Mhm.
And in the minutes of March, when you found it, on March 21st,
In the past, the Plan Commission has not reviewed the bylaws annually.
It-
We are going to review them soon, as soon as staff is ready with the recommendations and a presentation. And then I think it's a good idea for us to make sure that we follow that part of the bylaws if it stays in the bylaws.
I'm sorry, I wonder if you could tell me that again.
Oh, sure. We are going to review the Plan Commission has, to my knowledge, I'm not sure when the last time the Plan Commission reviewed the bylaws. They haven't done it since I've been on the Plan Commission, which is several years. We are going to rectify that and review them soon. And hopefully then, if that provision stays in the bylaws, we will follow it. And so if we, let's say we review them in October, if the bylaws say we're supposed to review them again within a year, then we should review them the next October. 100% agree with you.
I think the staff must have needed an order from you, and that would have required a motion and debate under your bylaws, and at least an inquiry as to whether everybody agreed with the motion. Like, when are they going to get back to you? Are they going to go to lawyers? Are they going to produce a marked up copy that shows you how it was before? And
I presume so.
so I would suggest that the Plan Commission needs to make a motion to order the staff to stop the work, stop any work it's doing. If it hasn't made any decision yet, it doesn't have to rescind it, but stop any work it's doing, and then have
We will have a public hearing
discussion
when the
and
staff
order
brings us
staff-
the ordinance, when the staff brings us the recommendation, we'll have a public hearing and you will get as much time, pretty much, as you want to weigh in on the state of the bylaws. I'm not going to do anything like you just suggested.
Okay, I guess that would be the thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, staff report?
I want to let you know that the rezoning case that came before you on North Lincoln Avenue, is, 4 properties owned by Howard Wakeland, that the city council approved that rezoning request unanimously. Second, I want to let you know that in October, there's going to be a training session for citizen commissioners. It's going to take place in Illinois Terminal, and I'll send you more information about it, the specific dates. But it's going to be, I believe it's Thursday, October 10th, which would be a night that we normally meet. So hopefully we don't have any plan cases for that evening. If we do, I don't know, we'll have to make it work somehow. But it'll be an opportunity for training, learning new things, asking tough questions, and hopefully getting some great answers. But we're bringing in out-of-town guest speakers who are all expert practitioners in the field of planning. And it'll be an opportunity for plan commissioners countywide, everyone from all the different municipalities, and there's even some county townships that have plan commissions as well. They'll be invited. Also, the Zoning Board of Appeals will be invited. But you'll get to learn about legal issues, planning concepts, new trends in planning, things like that.
Thank you. Anything further?
No.
Okay, we don't have a study session, so we're adjourned.